Imagine mourning your husband for 6 heartbreaking years, only to meet your new best friend's husband, and he looks exactly like the man you buried. But here's the twist. He's alive, smiling, and has no idea who you are. Emily stood frozen in the hallway of Sandra's home, her heart pounding like a wild drum. Her eyes were locked on the man walking toward her, a man who looked like he had just stepped out of her nightmares and dreams all at once. His smile, his walk, even the tiny scar beneath his jaw, it was Kenny. Her Kenny. The same man she lost 6 years ago in a terrible car accident that left the body beyond recognition. The same Kenny she buried with trembling hands and a shattered heart. But how could this be? Emily had just moved to this quiet town 3 months ago, trying to rebuild her life. She met Sandra at a community meeting, and the two bonded instantly. Sandra was kind, cheerful, and fun. The kind of woman you'd want by your side when you're trying to heal. They spent hours talking, laughing, and helping each other out. Emily never once mentioned her late husband. What was the point? She had made peace with his memory, or so she thought. Until now. Sandra introduced the man as her fiancé, Jason, a name Emily had never heard before. But the face, that face, it was unmistakably Kenny. Same eyes, same dimples, same warmth. She felt her knees weaken as 1,000 emotions crashed into her at once. Shock, confusion, joy, and fear. This wasn't just a coincidence. It couldn't be. She needed answers. But how could she even begin? Jason, or Kenny, whatever his name was now, looked at her with polite curiosity. No spark of recognition. No flicker of memory. Just a kind stranger meeting his fiancé's friend for the first time. Emily excused herself and rushed to the restroom, her breath shallow, her head spinning. Could it be that Kenny didn't die? Could it be he had survived the crash and simply forgotten? That night, sleep refused to come. Her mind replayed every memory, every laugh, every kiss, every tear. She had buried him in her soul, and now he stood breathing, living, loving someone else. The next day, she returned to Sandra's house with trembling hands and an aching heart. She stared at the man and softly asked him, "Have we met before?" He chuckled and shook his head, apologizing for not remembering. His voice, it was the same. But he was different, distant. Emily tried to tell Sandra her suspicions, but Sandra laughed it off. "Oh, Emily, you're probably just seeing someone who looks like him. Jason has lived here for years. He had an accident some years ago, lost all his memories before then. Poor thing never even found his real family." Emily's heart skipped. The pieces were starting to fit. An accident. Memory loss. No family. It had to be him. She began digging. Old photos, hospital records, police reports. The more she uncovered, the more the truth screamed louder in her soul. But Sandra wasn't convinced. "Emily, I love you like a sister. But this is crazy. Jason is not your husband. You're just hurting. Let it go." Emily couldn't. She knew. So she planned one final move, the only thing that could prove she wasn't going mad. She invited Sandra and Jason to a house outside town. A house she hadn't visited since the accident. Their matrimonial home. The house Kenny had built for them with his own hands. The car slowed to a stop in front of a quiet, weathered home with white paint peeling softly under the touch of time. Jason looked through the window, confused. Sandra leaned forward, scanning the place. "Emily, whose house is this?" she asked, curiosity replacing the tension they had carried on the drive. Emily didn't answer. She stepped out, clutching a small leather album in her hand, the last proof she had. Her steps were slow but steady as she walked to the front door and unlocked it. The air inside smelled like memories, dusty but familiar, like pages from an old diary. Jason stepped in hesitantly, eyes sweeping the room. "This place," he whispered. "It feels strange." Emily turned to him, tears welling in her eyes. "Because this is the house you built. For us." Jason laughed nervously. "I'm sorry, what?" Sandra stepped between them. "Emily, stop this. Please." Emily walked to a wooden shelf and picked up a framed photo. It was slightly faded, but clear enough. Her in a white dress, Kenny in a dark blue suit, smiling at the altar. She handed it to Jason. He stared at it, silent. His hands trembled. His eyes narrowed, then widened. That's me." Sandra's eyes darted from the photo to Jason. "What are you saying?" Emily opened the album, page after page of their wedding, their honeymoon, their birthdays, their laughter. Jason, Kenny, flipped through them slowly, almost in a trance. Suddenly, he clutched his head and stumbled back. I don't understand," he murmured. "These images, they feel like dreams, like echoes." He dropped to his knees. "Why do I feel like I've lived this before?" Tears streamed down Emily's face. "Because you have. You're Kenny. You're my husband." Sandra was shaking her head. "This can't be happening. This is not possible." But the truth was already tearing through the walls of doubt. Emily made one last move. She drove them all to Kenny's family home across town. The moment his mother opened the door, she gasped and staggered backward, clutching the doorframe. "My God! Kenny!" she whispered. His siblings emerged, each one staring in shock and disbelief. One of them began crying. The other dropped a glass bowl. Kenny stood frozen, staring at the woman in front of him. "I've been seeing this face," he said softly. "In my dreams. Crying. Every single night." His mother sobbed and held his face. "Because you're my son. You were never supposed to be gone." In that moment, the house broke into chaos. Sobs, embraces, silent prayers. Later, a search into the accident records revealed a horrifying truth. The body found in the wreck wasn't Kenny's. It was a traveler, someone who hitched a ride and died in the crash. No one had ever identified him. In the panic and confusion, Kenny was declared dead. But he had survived, unconscious, bruised, and lost. His memory wiped clean. He had been found far from the accident site, wandering. A kind woman took him in, helped him recover, gave him a new name, a new life. Sandra sat in silence. Her world cracked open. "I never knew. He never told me. He had no past." Emily looked at her, heart heavy. Because he didn't know. For the first time, silence felt like truth. The truth had surfaced. But the question remained, what happens now? The days that followed were heavy with silence, healing, and hard decisions. Kenny, no longer Jason, spent most of his time with Emily's photo album, sitting alone in his old home, staring at pieces of a life he didn't remember but deeply felt. Each picture stirred something in him, a warmth, a tear, a forgotten smile. He began asking questions. What was their first date like? Did he really build the house with his own hands? What made him fall in love with Emily? She answered everyone with patience and a trembling heart. Every word was like a seed, and slowly, something began to grow in him again. Recognition not through memory, but through emotion. Sandra, meanwhile, stayed distant, confused, torn. Her entire engagement had been built on a man with no past, and now that past had come knocking, loud and undeniable. One afternoon, Sandra came to Emily's door. She wasn't angry. She wasn't crying. She just stood there, holding a small box of photos and trinkets she had collected during her time with Jason. "I brought these," she said quietly. I thought maybe they'd help. But I also came to say goodbye. Emily stared, unsure. I've been thinking a lot, Sandra continued. I never really knew who Jason was. I just loved the man he was with me. But that man has a life, a family, a wife, and maybe he needs to finish that story first. Emily's eyes welled with tears. Sandra smiled. Bittersweet. He was never mine, Emily. I see that now. And I think, deep down, I always knew something about him was borrowed. That same evening, Kenny stood in the backyard of his old house. Emily joined him under the stars. He turned to her and said, I still don't remember everything, but I remember the way my heart feels around you. That has to mean something. She nodded, tears glistening. A week later, they renewed their vows. Quietly, softly, surrounded by family, and with Sandra sitting in the front row, smiling bravely. A year passed. Kenny's memories returned slowly, some triggered by smells, some by songs, others by laughter. But what didn't return? Love rebuilt. Sandra eventually met someone new at a conference out of town. A gentle, thoughtful man who had also lost someone in his past. They understood each other's scars. When she got married, Emily and Kenny were there, cheering the loudest. Their strange, painful, beautiful story became something they often shared with others. Not as a tale of tragedy, but of second chances and the power of truth. In the end, life didn't return to what it was. It became something better. Sometimes the past returns, not to hurt us, but to remind us who we truly are. And when love is real, not even time or memory can erase it. If you found this story heartwarming and powerful, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories. Thank you for watching.